All right, so if you're building software the right way, you're shipping your MVP and constantly iterating to find product market fit. But after a while, you're going to hit a fork in the road where you need to decide, do you continue building on all the technical decisions that you made along the way, or do you rebuild into something new? We've been building Clipflow, and the key part to this whole journey in the last year has been trying to find product market fit, right? So we are just built on a platform. We chose the tools that allowed us to move fastest, and we've been building the tool. Now, obviously over time, things get added on top. So you're kind of creating a little bit of a Frankenstein, which is fine because, we're just trying to find it, ship it, find things that work, find things that don't, pull them out if they don't work and leave them in, or refine them if they do. But there comes a point, which is now, and we see this quite often, it's where you have to try and make the decision between keep refining what you've got or restart from scratch, reimagine, rather than have this Frankenstein monster take all these things, learnings, and put them into a new package. So that's what we're talking about today. We're here. We've been making some hard decisions, and we want to talk about them because we want to remember this day in the future and look back and go, was that a good decision or was that a terrible one? So
yeah, we've done a lot of experiments up to this point. I think like software and business, a lot of the time people do experiments, but they never clean up the ones that didn't work in that way. So you're like, you test something and it doesn't really work and you leave it in the code, or you leave that process in the business. And so it'd feel good to sort of clean it up. And that's sort of what got us to this point. Also the fact that we were just never really satisfied with what our products can do or how good they look or any of that. Always partially unsatisfied, which I think is a key to any sort of good product, is be unsatisfied with what the product is. Because you can do better, do it better. Whether or not we refine or rebuild came down to a few things. Current tech stack. Do you want to talk about current tech stack?
Yeah.
And what the limitations were?
Yeah, cool. So what we started with is a Rails tech stack for those non-technical. It's just a framework that allows us to build front end, which is the stuff you see, versus the back end, which is where the logic happens. It allows us to build that in one package, so we don't have two different applications running. It's very simple and it's very quick, right? So we can move very fast. There are some limitations to it though. It's not really a fully featured front end stack versus other tools like React, which is a nice tool that helps us make build front ends really easily. They both have their pros and cons. Just throw that out there. So you do introduce a little bit more complexity when you have different languages and stuff like that. But Rails has got us really far and we've used a lot of things, but there are still times when we're just like, we want to be able to do certain things and it just makes it harder to do. Things like when you use a front-end stack, the client, so the browser on their side actually handles a lot of the rendering. So you can make changes quicker. Whereas when you're relying on server rendered, it has to go to the server and back. Now we have the problem where we're in Australia, in a little island in the middle of nowhere, and we're talking to the United States and countries overseas. So we have to send data across a long way. So it creates a big delay. So one of the fixes we're doing is obviously moving our infrastructure from Australia to the mainlands where everyone else is, and we cop the speeds. But then, our Australian customers would have slow speed. So what we're looking at now is kind of how can we improve that, and building a front end application does help with that. It helps interactions be faster. It gives us access to other tools. Now that's where we get to the point is, how do we refine or continue with what we've got, or do we rebuild? And rebuilding means rebuilding components because they've been done in a different way. So these are little buttons and the tags and all those things need to be rebuilt versus, just constantly keep refining. So try and build everything else in a different way. But what I'll do is I'll throw back to Darrell and I'll talk about, not just the tech stack, but what the whole app feels like. Because this is, in a sense, you can refine what we've got, which is, let's be honest, to this point is basically just Ken YOLOing it the whole way through, getting a rough design and kind of saying, this works, let's run it, to now more of a cohesive product.
Yeah. So we definitely sort of already did refine in a few ways where we took steps, like you're saying, moving infrastructure to try and get the same benefits. but it reaches a point where, because of the customers we're going after, there is somewhat of an expectation about what things need to feel like, how they need to act, and a lot of those things are lacking or a bit harder to implement in a certain way in what we're currently using versus what we're going to or thinking about going to. And that's all the nice little things, the things that they probably cost the most time, and they're not required for the product to do the job. Like, we have hundreds of people making projects, doing a great job. Everything like works, it does the job. And we had this experience with the last business where you can get so many things done that are so much more important than the polish and the really nice stuff. But also, when we're approaching this market from once we scale, we probably won't be speaking to people who sign up. Like, people will just jump in, and you really need some sort of feeling of like, this is the boys. I want this in my life when you jump in. And some of that stuff does come from the little polish, the frame of motion, and little like sparkly bits of, we're not going to throw confetti on the screen. We're not that type of software, but being able to just do things in a really nice way, especially because we're putting so much data into the pages now. A lot of the really advanced tooltippy, fancy animation-y stuff that can let you drill down into data without cluttering up the main page is really important, because we want people to be very much not confused when they start and very much able to get superpower out of the software if they know where to drill deep into. And those things are going to be a little bit easier when we have the right state management and stuff.
Yeah. So currently, just implementing things like Darrell just touched on there, state management basically means like what is the state of the page currently, and sharing that state across multiple components. That's very difficult to do in our current stack. It's just not built for that. So we're looking at tools that allow us to do that. So if we, for instance, if we had like a left sidebar open and we want to let the rest of the page know that the left sidebar is open so that we could render different things, doing that in our current stack is hard. It's harder. It's not impossible. And I guess also something to be really clear here on is, I believe personally it's a skill issue, which means I don't know how to do it. That's really where it comes down to. But that being said, we want to be able to move as fast as possible. So sometimes that means, it always means, use the tools you're familiar with. Right? So we came from a very strong Rails API, React front end, and to be able to move fast again, I feel like that's what we need to leverage again. We tried the other way, which is great for server rendered pages, which we'll keep inside the app for sure. There's definitely pages that benefit from that, especially share links, anything we want to do, open graph, all that stuff, super simple. But the nice thing about technology is that it keeps improving, and there are now tools that allow us to do and basically get the best of both worlds, right? So we get to use Rails, plus we get to use a React front end inside with the same Rails routes. Everything just works. So super excited about it, trying it out, and it's great. Another reason why we think a rebuild here for us makes more sense is that we get to go and basically throw everything in the bin and reimagine. So for us, this is really important because, like I said in the beginning, Frankenstein happens. You start getting feature requests and you just kind of chucking them in just to get them going and testing. But you get to a point where you're like, okay, cool. How do we make this cohesive? How do we make this actually feel like it belongs here? And that means a redesign, right? So it does actually mean you need to redesign, rethink. And by doing that, you're going to be rebuilding components anyway, because you're going to change sizes, you're going to make everything. And then that's what it gives you the opportunity to say, okay, well, should we keep using this tool or should we change something else? Because it's kind of the work's almost the same, right? So it gets very similar because you are rebuilding everything. Now, another reason we like this kind of approach sometimes is because you get to use, in tech, like I said, you get to leverage new technology and tooling, which actually could allow you to move faster. So it's something you need to consider. It's like, when I switch to this tool, will I actually move faster? Not just because it's a shiny object, because like, let's be honest, React isn't a shiny object anymore. It's been around for over 10 years. It's stable. It has a great ecosystem in the front end. Like, components are available for us to leverage. We can use things that take a fraction of the time. So like, for instance, we just implemented our organization selector. It currently is just a click, no animation, opens a pop-up, you click what you want. Cool, it works, functional, great job. We've just implemented a new one in React, leveraging a library that now we click, animates in beautifully. It's got a little search bar. So when your list grows, which I actually already noticed in some of our customers are getting lists of 15, that starts to get hard to manage. So now we would have had to implement that component from scratch. Way harder to do. Now we just grab the thing off the shelf, style it how we want, and we've got all the functionality. So for us, it's like we're making we're copying a little bit of a hit now early so that we can move faster in the future. Because when these component libraries also, remember, there's millions of people using it and they're all iterating and they're all creating. And it's really, for me, React is the king of front end. Unfortunately, that's what it is. Whereas Rails for me is the king of back end. So if you can use both of them, you're going to get that power. And that's where we kind of have to make those decisions. So we've had a lot of back and forth about this because I'm really unsure. I get always unsure about my choices. I'm like, well, which now, because you're changing, like, where's the best choice? But it is good to use something for sure. Like if you're going to rebuild, choose something and your team knows. And then is it going to give you an uplift? So the short-term pain. And the nice thing about Clipflow is that it is still quite young. So you can kind of afford to do this. That being said, we rebuilt RealHub about 4 times, like actual full redesigns. And the nice thing for us was always, is it going to be double as good? Like, can you say, is it going to be double as good by doing this change? And if you can say yes, and you know that you can execute, it's not going to take 4 years to get it out, because that is definitely a pitfall. But if you can get it out and you can do it quickly, then go for it. And the nice thing about Clipflow right now is that in its current state, it works, right? Like there's nothing like people are waiting for. There's no features. It just does its thing. But we want to reimagine and say, like, what does this look like at the ultimate level? And like pull inspiration from the best product out there, the best products, and say, we want to be known and seen as the best. And how do we do that? So then this is where you kind of get to this refine versus rebuild.
Yeah, it's the product vision. You have to have a really strong idea of where you want it to go. And like before you do a rebuild, just sense check that against the vision. Just be like, is what I'm currently doing going to support what I want to be in 5 years, what I want the product to be in 5 years? If it's a no. And like that even comes into the consideration of like staffing. So hiring people, which is one of the considerations of sticking to a React front end, because we know there will be a lot of people who will know how to work on it. Yeah. And just going back to the RealHub stuff, every time we did one of those rebuilds, we did attempt to refine it first. We always looked for ways, because of the cost and the size of the projects, we always looked for ways to try and refine first, and always found that you couldn't quite get the uplift that it was worth, because it still takes time to refine everything. And then you end up without most of the benefits that a rebuild would come in as well. And usually all of the reasons we rebuilt, which is the same as Clipflow, is as scale increases, the software no longer supports things at those scales, and you identify the holes in user patterns much faster as you get more and more people into the system. And like you said, like a bigger list of organizations, once it gets to a list of 7,000 projects someone has in Clipflow, you're going to have very different problems for managing those things than you do now. And sometimes the underlying way everything is built doesn't support that, and you do have to look at how can we build this so it's better for what the scale we have now.
Yeah. And just for all my Rails friends out there, I'm not saying that Rails can't do it. I'm saying old mate over here can't do it. That's the key.
Yeah. So when I said staffing, I mean like someone can do it. Yeah. There might be 3,000 people out there who can do the really good stuff in Rails. Where are they working? They're working at Shopify, GitHub, whoever's using Rails. Like they're very highly paid and very hard to get working for our business. So finding really good Rails people that can do that stuff is going to take more time, is going to be challenging. Whether or not that's true, we don't know for sure. It's just a guess based on the size of Rails as a product and everyone else using other things. And another consideration was obviously like the AI models are better at generating React code than they are Rails code. Yes. And you have to be taking the same advantages your competitors are going to be, which is if everyone else is building in AI things and they're having a better time because all the libraries exist for React, we are at a disadvantage if we don't have the same tooling and speed, which is like, it's not a complete handicap. It's not going to kill your business, but it is a consideration in rebuilding and choosing different things to do. Yeah.
So that was definitely one of them. And you said it before I did, but it's, how can we leverage AI, which is what we want to do? How can we generate components quickly, which is key? It's like, I would spend because we build custom components, I'd spend a day building a type of component. It's a waste of time, right? Like, because in the end of the day, it's just to do something. And if we can just pull it off the shelf, or we can get AI to write it for us quickly because it's been done a million times, why wouldn't you do that? So for us, like, our goal is to be as small and agile as possible, because that means we can move as quick as possible. And then what tooling allows us to do that with our skill set, right? Like with
the skill set of the other small teams that work with us, to be able to just go like, that's a really cool idea, go and execute it and do it as fast as possible, test it as small as possible, and then probably rebuild it when it's like we realize something was wrong about it.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we just want to talk about that because it is with something we've been talking about a lot, and just deciding like when you do things. And it's just nice to have a solid foundation, something like to work off of. You know that this is kind of the right decision that's going to last you at least a year or two. But it is something to consider, and it's kept me up at night for sure. But I think that's what you should do, and you shouldn't just always opt for rebuilds, because like as software engineers, everyone likes to just do a rebuild because like everyone else's code is rubbish. This new code will be way better. It's not going to solve your problems. There's going to be pros and cons to each one, but what one can actually allow you to move fastest. So, you know, sometimes
which comes back to solving the customer's problems, right?
Correct.
You just want to be able to do that as fast as possible, and a new library or framework isn't going to do that. Yeah. But it may help you do it in the future. Like if you're thinking about long-term business growth and resourcing, it might help you help more customers. But just changing for the sake of it because there's a new one, squiggly do JS, probably don't do that.
Yeah, so it's a tough one. It's always a tough one to make the decision. But I think sometimes when you have big goals and big dreams on how you want your UI to function, and just split it up, like it's one of those things. We just have to opt for what can we do, what can we do, and what can we implement, and then go.
It's a hard one to like break down into like what are the key points where you just know it's the right thing. So like Ken said, we don't know that it's the right thing, but we think it is. Yeah. And what are the things? I guess it's just a feeling thing. You just use your app, feel your app, and if you're like, I want this to be 10 times better, how do you get there? Which might be refining or rebuilding.
And I like one way I like to think about it as well is, or experiment with it is do a proof of concept. Build something out small. Start with one page, and figure out does this allow me to move faster? Is it actually, or is it just, was it my imagination? Like, don't try and rebuild your whole entire app. Like, that's just silly. Try and rebuild sections of it that can be sectioned off. So we always had different pieces of the tool. Like we had a campaign manager, and there were distinct things. So in Clipflow, you have a similar, an idea or ideation piece, a project management piece, a overviews pieces. All those things are separate. So you can iterate and refine each one individually, as long as you kind of keep them a little bit cohesive. Even if you use different tooling and stuff and keep them similar, you're going to be okay. And then you're not committing to a full rebuild. Like I think a full rebuild, like we're going to change the whole language, that's dumb, and you're going to waste a lot of time. But if you can keep all your logic and stuff, and I guess front ends is something that rebuilds quite often because user requirements change over time. And especially during the initial stages of the business where you are still trying to figure out what it is that's the killer features. So you don't know. So when you do know, there are going to be times where you have to strip, and you go, okay, well, when we strip all this doesn't look right. So how do we make this all fit? And I think that's the cool thing. And I also said to Darrell, let's just go experimental. Let's go experimental. Let's just imagine something that we're not thinking about it right now, and let's just go as far to the left or right as we can and see like what does this actually do? And by doing that, we can, go from that and just build to the future. So big decision, but something that you will definitely experience quite often.
All right. So do you want to go through the pros and cons, or do you reckon we've covered it in that?
Okay. I mean, we can quickly go through the pros and cons of this, but I think we touched on most of them. But refining, right? So refining is this thing you want to do first, always, because it's quicker. It's going to be way quicker to implement. You're going to have all the things you need. You're going to know everyone's going to know what you're doing. You're just going to be changing things up, right? You can do it in a day or two, refining. There's no real disruption to the current process. So you're not going to be like having to learn new things or teach people new skills. It's just like, just go. So pros, very obvious, refining. The cons are that you are limited to the current processes, and you're also limited to the past decisions. So those are going to restrict you because you've made decisions on how things look. You can't just go and implement a completely new thing, otherwise your app's going to look really bad. So that's the major con really with refine. It's like, if we made this decision and it's like, this is how the app is laid out, I can't change that. Like the sidebar's on the left and it's fixed. And that's how it looks. And these modules don't work together. You're stuck, right? Do you want to talk about rebuilding?
Yep. So pros of a rebuild. It's always fun to imagine something completely different. It gives you an opportunity to really think about things differently, and usually with a lot more information than the first time you've done it. So from a design perspective, you're taking a lot of guesses when you design your MVPs and your early stage product, and you're getting answers about what was right and what was wrong throughout. And like Ken said, every decision you made at the start can limit how you act on those new bits of information without the rebuild. So the rebuild gets you a fresh start. It lets you sort of put a lot more things that you now know exist into the right places in your head so that everything can like work together. Mm-hmm. You get new angles on the problems that like you've seen the actual problem in practice and you've seen what isn't a problem in practice, and you get to approach it from new ways. With a lot more context than when you do your first or second. Like your earlier versions, you always are hopefully going to have more context from dealing with people, watching customer sessions, whatever it is. And you get to put all of that new stuff in with a much more holistic view. So things that you know are happening over here, a customer pain point over here, can actually be solved over here when you have that opportunity to like go from the ground up. Where all the information goes, you get like a whole new shot at it. However, it takes a lot more time. That extra freedom can actually be a bad thing for your customers, especially if it's a really highly used product. The muscle memory of things, moving stuff around, can get really frustrating. Changing the way things work when people are familiar with it, even though you know it's better for everyone long term, will be incredibly painful for your business. Not speaking from ClipFlow's sense, but from our past business, trying to change anything for the better when people are used to things will just cause your business stress because people don't want to change things that they get familiar with how to use. It costs a lot more to do. If you do have a team of engineers, they have to all be trained in this new way. They might be familiar with the old stuff. Maybe some of it transfers over. Maybe you have to write all new stuff. And you'll have people spanned across two things in the interim because you're going to be supporting both sides of the current business, potentially business as usual tickets and bugs and things that come up, while also trying to build. So the costs can blow out really fast.
Yeah. I think this is a key point. That's a key point, right? It's where are you in your business journey? Like, are you 9 years in with massive behemoths, or are you a startup? And that's going to really define what you need to choose or what your options are, right? Like, it's very difficult to try and go in, when you're 9 years new, you're massive, to try and actually do stuff. Usually there's a different strategies there. It's like you launch it as a different product completely. I mean, but to be fair, a good way to look at this, I think, is like Amazon. And they're constantly doing refinements to the AWS console. And they kind of release one product's console at a time. And it's a rebuild and a refinement, right? So you can think of it that way. They're rebuilding entire screens, pages, and sections, but one at a time. So they're not rebuilding the entire AWS at once, because you can't. It's not possible. You rebuild pieces. So there's a combo of two as well, once you get bigger.
Yeah, if you have a million engineers at your disposal and 10,000 H100, what are they, H100? The GPUs,
we did
the
AIs.
AIs.
Let's be honest, we did the exact same. We would rebuild sections of it. We also did so we had an administration section, which was very heavy in our time, and a client-facing section. And we chose to rebuild, the client side, and then we chose a full, we committed 6 months to a year just rebuilding the admin, but we knew that would increase our team's output, right? So we were like, cool, well, let's rebuild that. And then we cycled back to redo the client and bring in a whole bunch of self-serve features, which then removes load from your support team, which means the client can do more. So it's just a constant juggling act, and you've got to choose your battles. I think you're going to, in the end of the day, you're going to do both, but you've got to choose when to do each one.
And if you're smaller and earlier stage, it'll be harder to know what the right answer is.
Yeah.
In the case of like there's big numbers flying around of the business makes money and support staff and everything costs money, it's a lot easier to decide on the trade-offs because you're like, this is a $250,000 problem. It's going to cost us 6 months of 3 engineers. We're not doing that. We'll do it a different way. But when you're smaller, it's going to be more gut-based. Ask your customers how they feel about it. They might not tell you. You will know if you present something to someone just by looking at their face, if they're absolutely blown away wowed or not. And if you want them to be absolutely blown away wowed and that requires a rebuild, great. If you don't really care because they'll still pay the money for an average product, whatever it might be, you've just got to make that decision on your gut feelings.
Nice. Excellent. Hopefully that helps someone, but it's definitely going to help us in the future when we come and watch this video and go, you either made the wrong decision and we can laugh at ourselves, or we made the right one and be very happy. So until next time.
If you made it to the end and you have any questions, you can chuck them down below. I will see you down there. Person who made it to the end, appreciate you.
You're the best. Thank you. Catch you on the next one.